Migration out of Africa remains a major concern for European countries daunted by the number of people willing to get on boats to cross the Mediterranean Sea. But one expert, Robtel Paley, who had done much research on the topic, says it's time to debunk the rumor that all African migration is happening outside the continent. She says there's more migration within the continent than there is outside, but even that is not easy because there are so many restrictions barring country to country. She spoke to our foreign affairs correspondent Amarachi Ubani on the sidelines of the Mo Ibrahim weekend in Marrakesh, Morocco.
African governments are not doing a very adequate job of representing the interests of their citizens when they enter in a lot of these trade deals, not only with multinational corporations, but also with big-time multilateral organizations like the World Trade Organization, the WTO. So for instance, when the Liberian government sat down with Firestone, they should have been thinking about workers' rights. They should have been thinking about environmental degradation. They should have been thinking about the fact that we need to establish an industrial base in the country to process rubber into rubber products, to process rubber into condoms that we can export to other parts of the continent and the West. And so our leaders they have a full responsibility to ensure that these trade deals have the maximum appeal, the maximum impact for the citizens, and then also that they feed into the revenue base of the countries. I mean, if you're shortchanging yourself by constantly exporting raw materials, which we are wont to do, I mean, Nigeria is a classic example of exporting oil, and then you have commodity prices that completely plummet. So you're relying on these commodities, these raw materials, to drive your economy, but you're not establishing an industrial base in the country. So yes, there's a lot of shortchanging. And not only are these multilateral corporations or the multinational corporations to blame, but also African governments are to blame for not ensuring that they represent the interests of their citizens. I think trade, democracy, and justice are part and parcel of the same continuum. Without fair trade and trade that is based on rules and regulations that benefit not only states in the global south as well as the global north, then you don't have justice for the citizens of these particular states. In terms of democracy, if African governments and African representatives, political representatives, are supposed to represent the best interests of their constituents, their citizens, and they enter into trade deals that are not fair, then where is the justice in that? So I think of these three particular processes as part and parcel of the same continuum. I think African governments and African regional institutions are increasingly recognizing migration as an opportunity as well as a challenge. This Africa Visa Index really exposes these particular trends as being restrictive for the continent of Africa. And the purpose is to now the African Union has decided that they're going to develop an African Union passport where every national citizen of the continent of Africa should have a passport that enables them to travel freely without any visa restrictions throughout the continent. Now, I think African states, African regional institutions recognize this as an opportunity and a challenge. There's also the issue or the challenge of trade, right? If you're going to allow Africans to travel freely, there will be an increasing cross-border trade. Right now, I think if you look at the ECOWAS sub-region, ECOWAS only 10% of ECOWAS trade is intra-ECOWAS trade. Most ECOWAS countries trade with other parts of the world. So if we want to increase trade, if we want to increase regional integration, if we want to increase intra-Africa travel without these sort of barriers and restrictions, then we have to look at migration as an important issue to tackle.